So, here's a question for you. What could a handshake in New Delhi, a wild peace plan for Gaza, and a random trade dispute over Greenland possibly have in common? I mean, on the surface, they look totally unrelated, right? But what if I told you they're all connected? That they're actually tremors from this massive earthquake that's, well, fracturing the very foundation of our global order? Today, we're going to connect the dots and see exactly how.
Okay, so our story really kicks off right here with this picture. You've got the president of the UAE, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, stepping onto the tarmac in India. But look who's there to greet him. It's not some junior minister, it's Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself. Now you have to understand, in the world of diplomacy, a personal airport greeting like this, that is a huge statement. It's basically shouting from the rooftops that this isn't just another state visit. No, this is about cementing a really powerful new alliance. And what's at the heart of this incredibly warm welcome? Well, it's a partnership that, honestly, is pretty unlikely, but it's also incredibly powerful. We're talking about a relationship that's built on a foundation of pure economics, and it's already starting to reshape the entire region.
And if you want to understand why, just look at this number. $100 billion. Let that sink in. That's the amount of trade flowing between the UAE and India every single year. You know, when you're talking about that kind of money, it's not just a friendly partnership anymore. This becomes a strategic alliance, really, built on mutual economic survival.
Right, and this relationship goes way beyond just oil and cargo ships. We're seeing really deep collaboration in things like strategic investments, tech. But the real game changer, the thing that makes everyone sit up and pay attention, it's defense. For decades, literally decades, the UAE's security was pretty much guaranteed by the United States. But now, they're actively building defense ties with India. I mean, that is a tectonic shift. It changes everything.
So this whole pivot towards India, it's not happening in a vacuum. It's not just a one-off thing. It's actually the most visible sign of a brand new foreign policy taking shape in the UAE. It's a policy where they are deciding to chart their own course, completely independent from their old traditional allies. And this really breaks down the new power dynamic in the Gulf perfectly. Okay, so look at the column for Saudi Arabia. Their whole approach is strategic, traditional, structured, very predictable. But then you look over at the UAE, transactional, independent, and flexible. It's a completely different playbook. We're talking about a fundamental shift from playing the long, slow game of regional power to a super fast-moving, deal-focused strategy. And that word, transactional, well, it means exactly what it sounds like. It's pretty simple. If a deal is good for the UAE's economy, they're going to take it, period. Old alliances, messy regional politics, even pressure from their neighbors, none of that seems to matter as much as the bottom line.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. The evidence of this independent streak is absolutely everywhere. They've gone their own way in the conflict in Yemen, a lot of times diverging from what Saudi Arabia was doing. They've been accused of backing totally different factions than their supposed allies in places like Sudan and Libya. And then, the big one, they signed the Abraham Accords with Israel, which just completely shattered decades of Arab political consensus. A huge move. So the big question is, why? Why is the UAE and honestly so many other countries suddenly charting their own course like this? Well, this new approach didn't just appear out of thin air. It's a direct reaction to a massive disruption in global politics, a disruption driven in large part by Donald Trump.
Okay, so at the very heart of this disruption is let's just say, a completely new way of doing foreign policy. And a perfect example of this is the proposed Gaza Peace Board. Now, on the surface, that sounds pretty good, right? A positive step. But when you look at how it's actually structured, well, that reveals everything about this new, really unconventional approach to global leadership.
So, what's the price of admission to this Peace Board? Well, it's pretty steep. Let's walk through it. First, you have to pay a $1 billion entry fee just to get in the door. Second, you have to accept Donald Trump as the chairman for life. And third, you have to grant him personal veto power over every single decision. You see what's happening here? This isn't a diplomatic coalition. It's basically a private club where one person makes all the rules.
And this analyst, I think, just hits the nail on the head. The idea here seems to be to use the crisis in Gaza as a vehicle to build a kind of parallel UN. One that just completely bypasses all the existing international laws and norms, and instead centers all the power in a single chairman.
And, this my way or the highway kind of approach, it's not just limited to diplomacy. Oh no, it is at the absolute core of his economic policy too. The whole America First doctrine has unleashed a wave of tariff threats and trade wars, and not just against rivals like China, but against America's oldest, most steadfast allies.
So what happens when you have this constant disruption coming from the White House? Well, it triggers a global chain reaction. All around the world, nations are starting to realize they just can't count on a predictable America anymore. So what are they doing? They're done waiting for Washington to lead. They're starting to forge their own world, on their own terms.
And this timeline shows you the domino effect happening in real time. It's pretty wild. So first, the US threatens tariffs against its own European allies over a pretty obscure dispute involving Greenland. Then, and this is unprecedented, in a show of solidarity, those same allies send symbolic military forces to Greenland, basically as a message. And then the final domino falls. America's closest partner, Canada, pivots east. The Canadian Prime Minister literally flies to Beijing and starts talking out loud about a new world order that doesn't revolve around the United States. I mean, wow.
So, what's the consequence of all of this? It's pretty clear. The world is pushing back. The era where everyone just passively accepted American demands, that seems to be over. We're seeing new alliances forming, new trade deals being signed completely without Washington's input, and now the U.S. is finding itself in pretty serious economic disputes with its own allies.
And that brings us all the way back to where we started. Back to that big question, connecting a handshake in India, a peace plan for Gaza, and a tariff threat over Greenland. Are we actually witnessing the chaotic, messy birth of a totally new world order? One where it's basically every nation for itself? Or is this just a temporary storm that's going to pass, and the old, predictable world will eventually return? Honestly, the only thing that's certain right now is that the ground is still shaking.